I think after that wonderful last session, it's almost needless to do what I'm supposed to do here. But I'll make it very, very fast. I have 20 minutes. I'll probably crunch it under that. So what I'm trying to do this session is to look at the years of our work, what our partners are also doing, the challenges in the sub-region, and propose some themes for all of us here about how to really move forward. So I'll start first by saying, I'm getting this projected, so I think we really have to do a number of things if journalism is to have consequential value in our sub-region. Look at the time span that is taken, 1801, when the first newspaper landed in Sierra Leone. Imagine what the situation had been in Ghana, 1834, 1859 in Nigeria. Journalism that's a good enough time bracket to be able to create fundamental transformation. But the truth is that our journalism really has regressed. No question about that. Indeed, if you look at what is happening in Nigeria and Ghana, and go to the very homeland of where newspapers started in 1801 in Sierra Leone, you'll be extremely sorry about the state of journalism. So, in a sense, let us understand that we need to bring a little more philosophical understanding to the challenge or challenges that we face if we are going to help make significant value. So first and foremost, I think the problem we face is to see the interface between doing journalism and democracy building. That very funny separation is part of, in our own understanding, of why we are in this current sorry state. That indeed, if you see that journalism is suffering, in a sense, it is because democracy is suffering. It's in a sense because, its journalism is failing. Now let's look at it, how they come together. Journalism has always been at the core of democracy building. But if you look at both the teaching of journalism and the effective practice of journalism, it is not understood like that. It is just done as if, these are different terrains. And it's not very strange to do. We just really need to go back to understand that there is a legal basis for the work that we do in journalism, and that will then help us to understand. So for us in this hall, because predominantly we're from Ghana, so the question I want to pose is, when you look at the Ghanaian constitution and look at section 162, subsection 5, what could be its central motive? What is its central purpose? You find out that that section is calling us to understand that the duty of the media, first and foremost, is to create an accountability model that will make the democracy of Ghana effective, functioning, consequential. This is not an accident. If you go to every country that announces itself as a democracy, you will find that that is replicated. And I choose merely the ECOWAS sub-region just to illustrate. This section 162 of the Ghana Constitution is our own in Nigeria, section 22 of our Constitution, almost word for word. It is section 11 of the Sierra Leonean Constitution, 15 in Liberia, 209 in Gambia. So it is not an accident, that media is called. So the central purpose, really, of doing journalism is to ensure that it's in the inner of the whole democracy building. And once we understand that, perhaps we are able now to make some value. Then, this is again not strange. So these laws in these 5 countries that I've just related, they come to us in very received packages. First, it's handed over to us by a system of international law, all the treaties of which UNESCO has been consecrated to give meaning to. You find that that is the expectation under, an international framework of the work that media should do. Secondly, beyond international law is to look at national laws to understand the national laws are those things that I've just expressed. The third domain to understand this mission and purpose of journalism is to look at what case law says. So the legal basis, the legal foundation of journalism, first and foremost, really has to be understood in its democratic remit, how to make democracy functional. Now, I think for us in West Africa, we really have to see what we can do to make our region or sub-region a little better. And I think we should just take 2 quick domains. The first, of course, is that we are in an ECOWAS sub-region. The second is that also we are in this area that you can call the Gulf of Guinea. So what we are proposing here is to look at what might happen 10 years from today if we relate or tune the lenses of our profession to try to address a number of issues that we think are emerging. Again, in relating to that, folks on this panel have very brilliantly reminded us that, again, doing the work that we do is historically related. How media or journalism will have functioned in an agrarian moment is different from how it will function in an industrial age. Selassie made that point very brilliantly here. Then it is important to know that although the expressions and meaning of an industrial age still exist, but fundamentally, society has moved into a new digital age. What then will be those shifting or the meaning of doing media in a digital age? It's very, very important. Everything that Sule was saying here about the challenges of media, we were facing also in Nigeria, everywhere in West Africa. The mistake is that they didn't realize that media, the society itself has moved into a new age. And they were still using those principles, those tools of an industrial age, trying to understand, correct, and give meaning to media in a digital age. It's asymmetric, and it's not going to work. So, Cjid just thinks that perhaps we need some kind of conversation that helps us to understand that our practice must not only be historically rooted, they must also be philosophically nurtured, so that what we are doing becomes quite meaningful, and you don't think that what journalism was in the agrarian age in 1600s or in the industrial age mostly, in the 1800s, it will be what it will be now, in the 21st century. So here are a few proposals. The first is that we think that media development, as much as possible for our own age, should no longer be understood simply as strengthening newsrooms. That is important, that is critical. However, it is important to know that building democratic information infrastructure is a central way to help push journalism and therefore, a democracy forward. So we propose here what you might call strategic domains, and we listed some 12 of them for consideration, for conversation, and therefore for debate. One is the fact that in the digital age, we are now living with a new kind of reality, and that reality is what this conference itself has put at the center. information integrity, and the AI revolution. You like it or deny it, it's a fact that everything that we do today has been transformed almost completely. And AI is really going to further problematize this. So, both in journalism school, as Abner was accepting, helping us understand very well, journalism schools must understand this as a reality, and the practice itself must come to terms with this. Secondly, it's also the question of platform dominance, and a lot of that came up here. Platformization has become the central way of understanding our practice today, and of course, either you're talking of news reporting, news distribution, or how you finance the central project of journalism, you really have to look at it within this framework. Then, of course, the key issue. In a sense, you could look at everything we are doing in journalism in three regards. One, of course, is we collect information, we process them, we analyze, and secondly, we pass it to the next stage, which is how we distribute it to engage with our audiences. The third most important thing about the practice of journalism is indeed, how do you finance this whole operation? That's all the debate about having sustainability, whether you call it business model or otherwise. It's so key, and I'm not going to repeat a whole lot of what this brilliant panel has said. The fourth, of course, is therefore nobody expresses better than Kojo about trust and democracy, the legitimacy of democracy. If democracy is going to have any meaning, any consequence, people must have faith in it. And in this mission, journalism is not anecdotal, it is central. Next to that is then, you can't think of the work that we do without thinking of the safety. Professor Pate, our board chair, is here. He's an apostle of the safety of journalists, and it is one key issue. And even this itself, the great things that Professor Kakari and the Media Foundation did, and I think this is not celebrated well enough, because at the time that the sub-region was ravaged by military rule and the whole craziness of destroying freedom of expression, they laid the template of everything that we are building on today. That was one way of understanding safety. But in a digital age, safety has also taken an expanded way. So it's important for us to understand that these are new domains, and the next 10 years, how we deal with these issues will show whether I will be relevant, whether I will be able to help transform not only the ECOWAS sub-region, but perhaps the Gulf of Guinea, where we are as truly governed spaces, where people can, believe that democracy works for them. Now, of course, the decline in civic information. Our board challenged us, I think a year or so ago, that listen, it's not enough to be doing all these things that people are doing. You're publishing in Accra, you think, there's journalism in Ghana, you're publishing in Abuja or Lagos. You really have to go back and help rebuild local media. And we're setting up what they call the Local Media Sustainability Fund, which we're still trying to. You must, in Nigeria, we have a new policy now where local councils or local governance institutions just are having enormous money for them to run, but there's really no journalism to hold that whole process accountable. So that is something, again, that we really have to. Climate and environmental journalism. The environment we live is an environment that must really believable. And journalism makes no meaning to anyone if it's not able to give not only the narration of that process. Look at the floods that have made, Ghana headline news in the sub-region recently. In Lagos, Nigeria, any rainy day is a total chaos for. We really have to see how those issues that are in the domain of the climate, flooding, desertification, migration, all that, energy transition. Eighth point here is the geopolitical information competition, which the diplomat from Niger just spoke to so effectively. How are we look, we don't know what the neighbors are doing, and Anglophone West Africa is a small zone of shame, because the Francophone world at least makes effort. They speak English. What our brother calls small English really is an indictment of many of us here who cannot even speak small French. So, but if we're not communicating, one funny point that happened, when Niger and Nigeria started these very poor manners of trying to fight each other recently, it was found out that in Sokoto State, one of the border states, one of the Nigeria's contiguous states, really had only 2 French teachers. This is really how serious this matter is. How are you going to be able to do effective journalism when we can't even report what our next neighbors are doing, and they can create some sense of understanding and hopefully friendship. So then, of course, media regulation and democratic governance. And I remember when this whole aspect of the platformization issue occurred, and I think Tete has just said the best thing to be said about this whole issue. One country confronting big tech is just going to be suicide. It's not going to work. We really have to be able to band together. We had already proposed to Judge Sapong, our brother, who's perhaps the most knowledgeable person in the sub-region, in my view, in this regard, good regulation knowledge and so on, that we really need to create a belt that will bring some sense of conversation and how we should work with ECOWAS. Ben has proposed AU now, which is really a more interesting. Forget the fact that, the big techs try to find a way to work with South Africa. I bet no other country going it alone will be able to fight this big tech. So that's an important issue. And not to forget, skills transformation. We just completed a training. We were reviewing the training yesterday on OSINT. Open source intelligence. That's just profound. The digital age also brought new tools to do this work. And OSINT is such one of the very important tools to use. And we were a little bit disappointed, just to put it, it happens in Nigeria too, and we found it in Ghana yesterday. The interest and gravitation to the program just seems so a little bit flippant. So these are challenges. We really cannot joke with this. Journalism schools, organizations like us, Media Foundation, and every other civil group working in distance, we have to put some of these issues straight at the heart of the kind of work we are doing. If you look at the whole West African canvas today, there is no faculty that is understanding journalism in a very computational sense. The best stories are from databases today. If you don't have an experience on doing basic computer science, how are you going to function, And that's why everybody is chasing ministers about and so on. some of the most consequential investigations that's led to effective accountability prospects are really database kinds of issues. And so any of those issues that you're dealing with today, you really have to understand that the old, in fact, I have a very interesting experience. Recently, I went to one of the Nigerian University of Leone is in the middle belt of our country, and I was struck by the fact that this is the only faculty in Nigeria that seemed to have understood the interface of doing journalism in a digital age. In that faculty, they have a department of computer science, a department of library science, archiving. They have, of course, what they call the journalism, all the frameworks, all the funnels that really represent the digital age. So and I then asked the people who are doing journalism, how many courses in computer science are they doing? How many courses in library science? And she said, no. They all just go. So they have created something interesting, but apparently it's just by accident and it has no meaning to them. But these are the kinds of conversation that we find, thankfully, we have very thoughtful and progressive academics here. And we have to prepare the next generation, not only of journalists, but of newsroom leaders equipped with these kinds of knowledge. Regional integration, and obviously the knowledge infrastructure. If journalism proceeds without creating bodies of knowledge, consciously, because just reporting things is totally meaningless, frankly, in an age like this. You must report with the purpose of creating effective knowledge. And we have this we can share if it's of any point. I would just like to, 3 lines, let me read that, because the Imagine framework we propose that people think about is that all these challenges that we've talked, they suggest that traditional media development paradigm will no longer be sufficient if we really want to conquer the next decade. For much of the past 3 decades, media development has concentrated on strengthening individual news organizations, supporting investigative reporting, promoting press freedom, and improving professional standards. The priority today is to build resilient information ecosystems if we want to make our democracy work. Thank you very much.